talk, music, get it all
24 hours
on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar.
WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Niamey. Good afternoon and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world at WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, the headline stories. AES member states Mali and Niger hit by a wave of coordinated armed attacks over the weekend. Liberia's rubber brokers and farmers union reject presidential order banning the export of unprocessed natural rubber.
They affect we, the local producers, and also undermine the national economy. They exploit all, they try the price of the rubber, suffocate our survival.
Nigeria threatens legal action against South Africa over killing of its nationals in the country.
The killings are one too many. We need to remind South Africa that there's no nation that spent so much for them to be free from apartheid than Nigeria.
Ghana activates joint security task force to enforce anti-flood measures and avert further disaster. Please stay tuned for the details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Veronique Joy.
Thank you for joining our broadcast. Newslink begins in Mali, where the National Army, backed by Russia's Africa Corps, has reportedly repelled attacks by armed groups operating in the northern part of the country, with the towns of Anifis at the center of the shutdown. Both sides claim to have gained the upper hand. The Malian army says it has repelled coordinated attacks and inflicted heavy loss on the attackers, but the Azawad Liberation Front insists it has recaptured Anafis, a strategic town about 100 kilometers south of Kidal. Augustine Coley has more details in this report.
The Malian military says it has repelled a series of coordinated attacks launched by the Azawad Liberation Front and the Al-Qaeda-linked group for the support of Islam and Muslims known as Janim. According to the army, the armed groups simultaneously targeted military positions in Agelok, Anifis, Gao and Sevari, as well as the Kinyaroba prison near the capital Bamako. The military says the attacks were successfully repelled with support from its Russian ally, Africa Corps. It claims that 163 fighters it described as terrorists were neutralized during the operations. The army also confirmed that one soldier was killed and 4 others wounded in Gao, insisting that all the targeted positions remain under government control as search and clear operations continue. Africa Corps, meanwhile, says its forces killed Abdirrahman Zaza, whom is identified as a senior Janim commander and a close associate with Iya Agali during fighting in Anifis. But the FLA has rejected the military's versions of events, claiming it has taken control of Anifis, around 100 kilometers south of Kidal, and captured several Malian soldiers. Reports further indicate that military reinforcements have been dispatched from Gao towards Anifis as fighting continues. The latest violent scams amid an escalation in joint attacks by the FLA and Janim on Malian military positions. Over the weekend, the Malian armed forces also received new military hardware as authorities seek to reinforce the country's defense capabilities.
That was a report by our correspondent in Bamako, Aliu Cham, voiced by Augustine Bilkoli. Please stay tuned for our guest interview segment, where we will be looking at the implications of these attacks on the AES countries. We remain in the Central Sahel, with similar attacks in Torodi, located in the Tillaberi region of Niger Republic. Attackers targeted a community radio station, one of the few remaining broadcasters still operating in the western region of the country. Liptako FM was known for its programs promoting peace, security, and social cohesion. The attacks has raised concerns among residents. Here is Francis Boniface with the details.
The damage from the attack, marked by shattered windows, destroyed equipment, and buildings left in ruins, is still clearly visible. The Liptako FM radio did not escape the coordinated attacks that struck the town of Torodi last week. As one of the few radio stations still broadcasting in the area, Liptako FM has played a crucial role in raising awareness on security issues and keeping communities informed. Its destruction has left many residents deeply concerned. One resident, speaking on the condition of anonymity, shared his fears.
Honestly, the radio station had never received any kind of threat before this. Based on our own assessment and that of the security forces who came here, they believe that because the transmission mast is 53 meters high, the attackers probably mistook it for a mobile telecommunication tower. In Torodi, those are the types of installation they usually destroy. Out in the bush, there is no mobile network operating anymore. But our station has a light sign clearly identifying it as a Liptako FM. I don't know whether the attackers saw the sign or not, but this is the first time we've ever been targeted. We had never received any threat before.
Our source says this is the first time an armed group has directly targeted a media outlet in Torodi. Until now, he explains such attacks had mainly focused on schools and military installations. Liptako FM remains one of the few media outlets providing vital information to communities in western Niger. Its programming has long focused on promoting peace, security, and social cohesion, making its silence a significant loss for residents already living under the constant threat of insecurity.
That was Francis Boniface with that report filed by our Nyame correspondent Yakuba Habibulai. Nigeria has deployed 198 military personnel to the Gambia as part of the ongoing contribution to the ECOWAS mission in the Gambia, or ECOMIG. The contingent, made up of personnel from the Army, Navy and Air Force, was airlifted to Banjul aboard a Nigerian Air Force C-130 Hercules aircraft as part of the routine rotation of peacekeepers. Before departure over the weekend, the troops were reminded to uphold professionalism, discipline and respect for human rights while carrying out their mission. ECOMIG has been deployed to the Gambia since 2017. Following the political crisis that led to the departure of former Gambian President Yahya Jammeh, the regional force continues to support peace, democratic governance, and security sector reforms in the Gambia.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now we head to Liberia, where the National Rubber Brokers and Farmers Union has rejected President Joseph Boakai's executive order banning the export of unprocessed natural rubber. The order, which took effect on July 1st, aims to promote local processing, create jobs and boost value addition in the rubber sector. But the union warns the policy is being enforced without adequate local processing facilities, saying it could put thousands of families and farmers, brokers at risk. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
Liberia's rubber sector remains one of the country's key agricultural industries, even though export earnings have declined in recent months. The president of the National Rubber Brokers and Farmers Union, James Sikwe, says the latest export ban adds to existing pressures on Executive Order number 151, including a $100 levy per metric ton. He warns that these measures are making it increasingly difficult for brokers and smallholder farmers to stay in business.
Whenever this ban is imposed, it affects we, the local producers. There is no executive order offered in this country that have brought relief. They suppress the local producers and also undermine the national economy. They exploit all, they try the price of the rubber, suffocate our survival.
Liberia's Agriculture Minister Edizana Nuta, however, defends the policy. He says,
the president took this action to ensure that our farmers out there receive fair price for the labor. All of our farmers across the country have been showing appreciation to the president for his action. And those who are on the purchasing side have been making progress.
This is not the first time Liberia has moved to restrict the export of unprocessed rubber. Similar measures in the past have sought to boost local processing, but they have repeatedly sparked controversy over their economic impact. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Here in Senegal, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye has announced plans to launch his own political party to formally unite his supporters. The announcement was made during a meeting at the presidential palace with members of the 306 movement. The Senegalese leader has tasked former Prime Minister Aminata Touré with heading the committee responsible for preparing the new political formation. The announcement has already sparked debate, with many questioning whether President Diomaye Faye can rally broad political support behind the new party. For some perspective, here is Senegalese political analyst Mamadou C. Albert.
This can be explained by a simple observation. The Diomaye coalition has now been launched, but it has already revealed its limitations. It is a coalition with little electoral experience, bringing together parties that have very limited political representation. For example, none of these parties have a seat in the National Assembly. Perhaps this initiative has come rather late, but it reflects the president's desire to establish himself as the leader of his own political movement and gain greater political autonomy. The president's biggest challenge, in my opinion, is a lack of leadership experience. Although he is now the head of state and spent 15 years in PASTEV, he never led the party and never personally managed any electoral campaign, whether local or national. Even during the presidential election, it was not he who led the campaign. It was his political team. As a result, he lacks experience in directing electoral campaigns and leading a political party. We can already see this in the JAMA coalition, which he has headed since June, and even before then. Apart from appearing at its launch, the president has remained largely absent. He is not the driving force behind the coalition. Instead, figures like Aminata Touré and Dr. Abdurrahmane Diouf and other intermediaries have taken on that role. So, I believe the president's leadership, or rather, a lack of it, could become the Achilles heels of his own political projects.
That was Mamadou C. Albert, a Senegalese political analyst. In Guinea, the government has officially announced the end of the mandate of the special delegation that had been managing local municipalities since 2022. The decision follows the installation of newly elected communal executive councils across the country. However, the state is already warning that these special delegations could be reinstated if the newly elected local authorities are found guilty of poor management of local councils. Let's join Christopher, our teacher, for more.
Guinea's Minister of Territorial Administration, Ibrahima Kalikonde, has spoken out following the installation of newly elected mayors across the country. He announced the end of the mandate of special delegations that had been managing local councils since 2022, describing the move as a key step towards normalizing local governance.
With the installation of 8,753 communal councillors and the election of 375 mayors and 1,149 deputy mayors, our country is officially bringing to an end the transitional mandate of the special delegations.
However, the government has issued a warning to the new municipal authorities. It says that in case of poor management, misappropriation of public funds, or failure to meet their responsibilities, the state may once again restore to appointing special delegations.
Why the return to democratic governance remains the authority of elected officials, the use of special delegations remains a legal mechanism for restoring normalcy, ensuring proper regulation, and protecting the public interest under the revised local government code. The government will not hesitate to exercise this constitutional authority whenever necessary to address possible cases of mismanagement, restore fiscal discipline, or respond to serious misconduct by local elected officials, thereby ensuring that essential local public services are never disrupted.
ne soit jamais interrompu.
With this decision, the government says it is closing a chapter of the transition at local level, while stressing that good governance and the protection of the public interest remain its top priority for the new municipal executives.
That was a report by our correspondent Alpha Ibrahim Abalde, presented by Christopher Aticho. The Nigerian government has condemned the killing of 2 Nigerians in South Africa, warning that it may further diplomatic action if attacks against its citizens continue. The latest incidents come amid renewed concern over the safety of Nigerians living and working in South Africa following weeks of anti-foreigner protests. Our correspondent Yechenu Sasitu has more.
Nigeria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the victims were killed in separate incidents, triggering fresh diplomatic engagement with South African authorities and renewed calls for justice. The government is demanding a full investigation, the prosecution of those responsible, and stronger protection for Nigerians living legally in South Africa. Officials also warned that while Nigeria prefers diplomatic solutions, it may consider further steps if attacks on its citizens continue. Reacting to the development, governance expert Simeon Nna says accountability is essential if such incidents are to be prevented in the future.
I think the Nigerian government should reciprocate. The killings are one too many. We're just reporting 2 that happened on the 28th of June. We need to remind South Africa that there is no nation that spends so much for them to be free from apartheid than Nigeria.
The incident comes weeks after Nigeria evacuated hundreds of its citizens who voluntarily returned home following xenophobic tensions in parts of South Africa, which climaxed with the anti-migrant protest on June 30. So far, more than 700 Nigerians have been evacuated. For WADR, Yechenu Sasitu in Abuja.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. As a reminder of our top stories, AES member states Mali and Niger hit by a wave of coordinated armed attacks over the weekend. Liberia's rubber brokers and farmers union reject presidential order banning the export of unprocessed natural rubber. Nigeria threatens legal action against South Africa over killing of its nationals in the country. Still ahead in the news, Ghana activates joint security task force to enforce anti-flood measures and avert for the disasters. We also have the guest interview, press review on sports news. Stay with us.
From the heart of Nigerian politics, this is Yechenu Sasitu in Abuja, and you are listening to WADR 94.9 FM Dakar.
Thank you for staying with us. In Benin, the government spokesperson held a briefing on Sunday, during which he addressed several issues of national importance. Wilfred Leandre Hongbeji spoke about reforms in the management of the justice system and the delivery of key public infrastructure projects requested by citizens. Imo added his more.
During a nearly 50-minute question and answer session with journalists from the state broadcaster, Benin's government spokesperson, Wilfred Leandre Hongbeji, addressed several key national issues. Among them was the reconstruction of the Hudonu Bridge, which links the cities of Abome, Calavi and Cotonou. Responding to concerns after recent flooding disrupted traffic between the two municipalities, Hongbeji assured the public that the bridge will be completed and opened soon. The government spokesperson also highlighted reforms in the management of judicial documents. According to him, the new measures are intended to eliminate the bureaucratic hurdles and administrative delays that citizens have long complained about. Through the media briefing, the government sought to reassure the public that its reform agenda remains on track and that the administration is committed to delivering what it described as concrete solutions to the concerns of the population.
That was a report voiced by Imo Edit. In Ghana, the Flood Task Force has warned that unsafe buildings and structures obstructing waterways will be demolished as part of a nationwide effort to prevent further flooding. Speaking at a media briefing on Saturday, the Director General of Joint Operations of the Ghana Armed Forces, Brigadier General Foster Yeboah, said the military will lead the post-flood recovery operation. He stated that the team will clear blocked drains, rivers and streams, while unsafe and illegal sited structures that endanger public safety will be removed. Here is an excerpt.
The nationwide cleanup and recovery exercise will focus on restoring public safety, improving sanitation, and preventing secondary disasters such as outbreaks of cholera, typhoid, and other waterborne diseases. Particular attention will be given to the removal of refuse, silt, fallen trees, abandoned vehicles, collapsed structures, and other debris obstructing roads, bridges, drains, and waterways. As part of the operation, the Ghana Armed Forces will deploy personnel, engineers, specialized equipment to clear major drains, streams, rivers, and other critical waterways. In accordance with applicable laws and directives of the appropriate civil authorities, structures illegally erected within waterways or that pose an immediate danger to public safety and flood mitigation efforts may be removed where necessary. The Metropolitan, Municipal, and District Assemblies have also been directed to organize and lead cleanup exercises within their respective jurisdictions in support of the national operation. Their efforts will complement those of the Ghana Armed Forces and other security agencies.
We apologize for the abrupt end of that report, and that was the Director General of Joint Operations of the Ghana Armed Forces, Brigadier General Foster Yeboah, speaking there regarding flood prevention in the country.
This is the Newspaper Review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the Newspaper Review.
The Newspaper Review.
For the Newspaper Review this afternoon, let's head to Nigeria with WADR's Yechinu Sasitu.
Greetings. We begin from the Nation newspaper with the leading story about the alleged fake agency. Office of the Accountant General of the Federation says the controversial Presidential Economic Advisory Council has no operational account with the Central Bank of Nigeria. Federal government has dismissed claims that it spent more than 8 trillion naira outside the approved national budget. Now let's take a look at this day. The Presidential Foreign Intervention Promotion Council affair has exposed something that many Nigerians have long suspected, which is legislative oversight is increasingly becoming a constitutional ritual rather than a constitutional responsibility. United States says it will closely monitor Nigeria's 2027 general elections. Let's move to Vanguard, which reports that fresh documents have emerged showing that the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation approved the disowned Director General of the non-existent Presidential Foreign Intervention Promotion Council, Adeniyi Adeyemi, to attend the Canada-Africa FinTech Summit in August 2025. And finally, 2027 polls. Parties rush to meet INEC's uploading deadline, with the electoral umpire insisting on July 11 as deadline for the exercise. A host of the parties are having challenges and may not meet the deadline. And that's it on Press Review. Back to you in the studio.
Many thanks to Yechinu Sasitu for the Press Review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
For our guest this afternoon, recent coordinated attacks in Mali and Niger have renewed concerns over the deteriorating security situation across the Sahel. To discuss the significance of these latest developments, the evolving security landscape, and what it could mean for the wider Sahel and West Africa, I spoke to Bram Postmotus, an independent correspondent covering West Africa.
It tells us that they are capable to strike whenever and wherever they like. especially in the case of Mali, where they have expanded their operational zone to include pretty much the entire country. And in the case of Niger, where they have to face off a slightly more professional army, the Nigerian army has a bit of a better reputation. But again, the strikes no longer are concentrated only in the Tillabéri region, where they used to have their stronghold, but they seem to be spreading there as well. Mali is arguably in a far worse state than Niger in that respect.
We've seen that there have been intensified operations, especially with Russia being involved, but they have not been able to quell the attackers. So what does this tell us about their resilience, the fact that they have not been able to curb the security situation?
There have been coordinated actions between two ideologically very, very different groups. One is the Islamist guerrilla, the Al-Qaeda franchise in Mali called GNIM, and the other is the separatist movement, the Tuareg separatist movement up in the north in the Kidal region, which is now known as the Front for the Liberation of Azawad. So it's not so much resilience on the guerrillas or terrorists or insurgents' part, it's more their capability to organize and to coordinate actions. And on the side of the government, sadly, with or without the assistance of what used to be Russian mercenaries and then became the Africa Corps and were folded into the Russian Ministry of Defense, these two combined forces do not seem to be able to get a handle on the situation and contain the insurgent terrorist problem. And whether that's a lack of material, a lack of means, or a lack of capability to fight is obviously an issue that needs to be studied much more deeply, because they're not winning this war, and it's asymmetrical.
This inability that you spoke about to handle the situation, do you think would pose new security threats to the Sahelian countries, I mean the AES countries to be specific?
Yes, because it's based on a pretty lucrative business model. These groups are all closely aligned with all kinds of criminal networks that are engaged in things like kidnapping individuals, especially from high-profile countries. You remember that only a few months ago, the United Arab Emirates paid $50 million to GNIM for one of their nationals who had been kidnapped in Mali. That's obviously a very, very lucrative business. And the other things that they are involved in is like cattle rustling. They steal cattle, bring it across the border into either Côte d'Ivoire or take it to another country in the region and sell it off there.
Finally, looking ahead, what should governments in the Sahel do to contain the threats?
Well, first of all, they should dialogue with the insurgents, which is something that Malian civil society has been calling for a very, very long time. And none of the governments involved has been open to any of this. But as long as there is no dialogue, the violence will persist. And it's a vicious circle. No dialogue, more violence. No dialogue, more violence. That's the scenario. And then the other thing, which is obviously a pretty big taboo for the juntas in power in the Sahel, is some kind of collaboration with the states on the coast, who are all in the Economic Community of West African States, which the AES have left. But there is absolutely no way that you can contain the insurgent terrorist problem, which does not respect any borders, without working with the likes of Ghana, Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, and all the rest of them, because it is an international problem, it is a regional problem, and they will not be able to solve it on their own.
That was Brown Postumus, an independent correspondent covering West Africa, speaking there. All right, the FIFA World Cup 2026 is still on, and FIFA has defended its controversial decision to allow United States forward Folarin Balogun to play in the next World Cup match after suspending the automatic one-match ban that followed his red card in the last round of 32. The World Football Governing Body says the decision was made under Article 27 of its disciplinary code, a provision introduced in 2019 that allows sanctions to be reduced or suspended in exceptional circumstances. However, the decision has been challenged by the Royal Belgian Football Association, which argues that FIFA's own disciplinary rules state that a player sent off must automatically miss the next match. The controversy has grown following a report by the New York Times claiming FIFA acted after an appeal by US President Donald Trump, who described the decision as a correction of a grave injustice. The reports have renewed debate over FIFA's independence and the consistency of its disciplinary decisions. Norway has reached the FIFA World Cup quarterfinals for the first time in its history after defeating Brazil 2-1 thanks to a brace from Erling Haaland. The Norwegian striker now has 7 goals in the tournament, level with Lionel Messi and Kylian Mbappe in the race for the Golden Boot. The defeat also marks the end of an era for Brazil as Neymar announced his retirement from international football after the match. Brazil's all-time leading goal scorer bowed with 80 goals in 130 appearances for the Seleção. Elsewhere, England booked their place in the quarterfinals with a 3-2 victory over co-host Mexico. Jude Bellingham scored twice, while Harry Kane added the third, despite England finishing the match with 10 men. Today's round of 16, Spain faces Portugal before the United States take on Belgium for the final quarter-final spots. And that's all for the sports news. And with that, we have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM. Many thanks for listening, and thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudiju for the technical assistance. I am Veronique Njai. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.